Inventory Control in a WS Environment webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Andy Weiss for the presentation. Go ahead, Andy.
Right on. Thank you, Gary. So, yeah, like Gary said, we're going to have two little mini presentations here. First, I'm going to present on some more general concepts related to inventory control. Most of them relate to a warehouse management system, or rather I should say some of them do. And some of them don't necessarily have to, so I threw in that or not there because a lot of this just has to do with general warehouse management or operations regardless of software being in place. So if you don't know me, my name is Andy Wythe. I'm the founder of ASW Global Consulting. My contact info is on there, email and Twitter if you want to follow me there. And one of the things I get to do in my job that's a blast is review operations and find things that might be opportunities for improvement. So we're going to go over a number of those things today that are very typical for me to see when I go through someone's warehouse operations, and trim the fat off to be mainly focused on inventory control. But as you can imagine, inventory control really reaches into every part of the warehouse. So some of it has to do with picking, some of it has to do with counting, but inventory control is the basis for all of that, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about here is a concept that came up at a user group meeting a short time ago, and that was a return on your investment in a warehouse management system. And this had never really come up in a discussion before, and I thought it was a really clever approach, and it was simply that a physical inventory alone, removing a physical inventory, was a return for putting in a warehouse management system. So one of the TWL users said they put the numbers to it and found out, yeah, it'd be great to do barcode scanning, reduce errors during picking and receiving, and track inventory by bin, and all that great stuff that comes with a warehouse management system. But for some hard numbers, just eliminating their PI alone would give them a return in just a few years on the software. So if you're still doing a physical inventory, this is where I challenge you to go through this exercise. Why are you not cycle counting? Why are you still doing this PI? And so this is my theoretical company here. I'm going to do a physical inventory each year, and I've got 20 folks, right? Where's my little pointer? I've got 20 folks. I pay them $10 an hour. They're going to be doing this on overtime, time and a half. That's basically $300 an hour in labor. On Friday, we close business at 5 o'clock. We work till 10 p.m. On Saturday, we come in to finish the count, do recounts. We work maybe an 8 or 10 hour day, and that's our entire time spent, 13 hours of overtime. That gives us $3,900 of labor per location. Let's say I have 7 locations. That's $27,300 a year is being spent alone on labor for doing this PI. If that number doesn't sound like a lot to you, consider you've been doing them for the last 10 years. And so over the last 10 years, you have spent over $250,000 doing a physical inventory simply for some labor on Friday evening and Saturday during the day to count your inventory, right? That's an enormous amount of cash. So I thought this was a unique approach to killing off the PI and what the value behind it would be. And then we have the more typical conversations about it. You're closed for business, right? And we live in a world where Amazon can deliver in an hour, right? And so if you're doing a PI, your customers are walking up to a door with a piece of paper taped on it that says, sorry, you can't come in, we're closed for a PI today, right? That's quite in the opposite direction of where everyone else is headed, okay? Another very common discussion point about PI versus cycle is your delays in finding inventory discrepancies. So you're finding these things at the end of the year instead of throughout the year as you're counting those products. It's very typical when reconciling our PI, and if you do them, I'm sure you have this during your last inventory, you're up $500 on this item and you're down $500 on that item, and you consider that a wash because they're very similar items, and you know, well, we probably picked some of those wrong and sent them wrong out to customers, right? And so that explains why we're up and down $500. But you wait waited 365 days to find out that happened, and what would business have been like if you found out shortly after it happening, right? Much sooner. You could have contacted those customers, resolved the reason why the products are being picked incorrectly, what have you. And then the last thing on here is simply that you're counting the building one time, right? And pardon any background noise. I'm working from home today, so there might be a little baby that's going down for a nap right now. With a cycle count, we can target different products for different reasons. There's the theory of ABC, or velocity counting, so you'd be counting your A and B items more than your C and D. Why not hit your A and B items multiple times a year instead of just once at the end of the year? Or perhaps you have certain product line that is prone to theft. You can keep an eye on that area by counting it more frequently. A client I was just speaking with the other day, their A items, now they don't have an extraordinary number of SKUs in their warehouse, but their A items, they count every 14 days, which sounds crazy, but I'm sure they have a good reason to do it, and that's something that's possible if you're cycle counting, and something that's not if you're only doing a PI. Okie doke. Let me check and see if there are any questions. Please do feel free to throw out questions along the way. Enter them in the question panel, and George or I will answer them along the way if we can. Otherwise, we'll kind of collect them all up at the end and answer questions there. I don't see anything, so we'll just move on. So I made up a fake definition here for velocity in regards to warehousing, right? And so it's a joke, but the idea here is we want to be laying the product out in our building to make it as efficient as possible for all of our inbound and outbound processes, right? So these two images on the screen here are simply described as a U flow and through flow. And the concept is our fastest moving product should be taking the shortest journey. And if you picture that in the most literal sense, items can be cross-docked, right? They come in one door and they go right out the other door. That's a cross-dock. That's the shortest trip it's going to take through your building. But our A and B items, we really want to follow this short path here, and maybe C and D items are heading on a longer path, right? And if our docks are at opposite ends of the building, this through flow idea is that A and B items with a lot of velocity would be passing right down the center of the building, and we'd be pushing stuff off to the outside that was slower moving. Okay, what does this look like in reality, in a real warehouse? Maybe it looks something like this. So here's a warehouse. Inbound dock doors are over here. Outbound dock doors are over here. And in this particular operation, this racking and small shelving over here housed a lot of A and B product. And so the idea, this sketch here, was to pull those products out, pull the A and B items out of these two areas and bring them as close as possible to get our U flow in place, right? A and B items would take this short trip right here, and C and D items would take this long trip, right? So I encourage you to get out a plan of your building and map out where your products are and see how do you fit in this, and what's the travel time for an A or B product in your operation. Does it have to travel from one end of the building to the other and then circle all the way back around? If it does, this is an excellent exercise to go through. All right, here's some other concepts. Pardon my hoarse voice as well. Dead inventory, I said, would be included in this discussion, and what I wanted to bring to the table in our short time today is a different approach, kind of a unique angle to the discussion. I think everyone's on board with understanding, you know, you got money sitting there, you've got boxes collecting dust, we're counting this stuff over and over again, and it's not going anywhere. Our travel time is increased because we're passing by all this material that is slow to get to our stuff that is fast. Some of these things we just touched on. But I read an article recently, and if you're interested in it, reach out to me. I'll pass it to you. The focus, or one of the specific concepts brought up in this article, was the opportunity cost to dead inventory. And what was meant by that was that money that's sitting there not doing anything for you, what would that be invested in if it wasn't wasted on dead inventory? Would you be implementing a warehouse management system? Would you be getting newer, better, faster equipment for the warehouse? What would you be doing with that money? That's the opportunity cost. Okay. So consolidation of volume is the next one. And I got a couple images here. Pardon me. So if you walk out into your warehouse and you see any of these things, I think this is a very appropriate topic for you. We're not using volumetrically very much space, right? In 4 or 5 pallet positions that are visible here, we're using maybe 10% of the space. So when we say we're not using the volume well, these are examples. And this one in particular is very commonplace, and that is in my warehouse I have pallet racking. Maybe 90, 95, 95% plus of the storage is pallet racking, but not all of our product really belongs in pallet racking. So these are the materials that not only are we not using the space wisely, they're getting lost, damaged, dirty, right? And what we should be looking at are things like this, especially for smaller products, right? If you got a full skid of something, it makes sense to go in pallet racking. But what if they're small? Look at how many products in these little bins. I think this is 32 products right here in this tiny space. So small bins, medium bins, large bins. This is one of the coolest things I've come across here. They clearly made this themselves, but these are little dice. And the bins are sized perfectly for the product. Now imagine if these products were on pallet racking, laid out like this, right? Even if we had put plywood down here, what have you, how much space would those dice be taking up? An extraordinary amount of space, right? So reconsider your storage mechanisms, especially for smaller products. I definitely see way too much pallet racking or way too little shelving, right? And small parts bins. We all have big and little stuff for the most part. And we really want to move that small stuff where it belongs. Okay, the third one on here, we touched on moving products that move quickly closer to the dock doors, more in line with that U flow, right? But everything we talked about so far is just in plan. What about elevation? If you know me, if you've heard me speak before at the Tug Connects conference, I definitely said something about ladders and how they're the bane of my existence. I really can't stand ladders, watching folks in operations be directed to go pick something, and it's 3-4 shelves up in the air. They can't reach that from the floor, so they have to go find a ladder, and the closest ladder is 3 aisles away. They have to wheel it over, not to mention the safety concerns going up and down a ladder carrying product, right? So there's a number of factors that go into this, but purely taken from the speed component, pulling those products down hip to shoulder height, any A and B items we're picking frequently, we want those lower, more accessible. I should be able to get to them from the ground if I'm picking by foot or with the equipment that I have. I shouldn't need to change equipment to go pick that material. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to talk about here before passing off to George for some TWL specific topics is reducing seek and handling time. And what I mean by that is this. There's barcodes out, right? So when I approach this product, I can scan the bin and the material without having to handle the material, turn it, pull it out of the bin in order to scan it. This material here is stored excellently. You'll note up in the corner there is one product that the barcode's not out. That's the only flaw in this design, but otherwise this is fantastic. This is fantastic product layout. And the second thing that's great about this image is there's a bin per product. Okay, so we refer to that concept as primary picks in TWL. In any warehouse management system, this functionality should be supported where there's one item in a bin. But what I want you to consider here is if you were to call an entire shelf a bin location and there were 5 or 6 products on there, the seek time for someone to find that product when they have a pick could be 10 to 30 seconds, right? They're directed to the bin and they have to find the product that's in that bin because it's not the only one. So this one-to-one relationship here drastically increases speed while picking. And then again, the storage of the material facing out with the barcode out is excellent. All right, and this set of pictures here touches on a couple more things. The first two images have something in common, and that is known under a few different names. I call it pyramid picking. So our pickers have picked the product that is closest to them without taking down the tiers in order. And while picking from the floor, this isn't really dangerous. If you're picking from up in the air at all, you can be creating unbalanced loads, which is definitely a safety risk. This situation here just makes the inventory control team's job difficult. If I have to cycle count either one of these products here, it's a complete nightmare. I'm going to have to resort all this material, right? So we don't want to see this in operations. Folks should be picking tier by tier. And then this second image here has something in common with the third, and that's this guy down here, an open box, right? So we've got loose pieces sitting here. And just about any warehouse management system, TWL for one, supports this. Definitely something harder to do without a WMS, but the concept is to pick full cases and open cases from different places, right? So we don't want to open these boxes, lose these little widgets as they roll away, fall between the cracks, get damaged, broken, etc. And so the idea here has benefit beyond the product. It also has an impact on our pickers and gets rid of this situation here. No longer would our pickers be traveling through a zone picking both full cases and individual items. We would segregate the material where each picks take place, and folks there would be picking to proper carts to handle those materials, and folks in the other zone where just full case picks take place would have a cart or pallet with them to pick just full cases, and we wouldn't be mixing material like this. And I believe that is all I have. That's all I wanted to share with you guys today. My goal here was just to poke and prod a little bit and say, do you see any of this stuff in your operations? If so, I think there are solutions to improve every one of these situations. Bring it up to your fellow users, reach out to me, whatever you would like. George, I'm going to pass it over to you. And George is going to go over some TWL specific topics. And you should be the presenter now, sir.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. We're going to go ahead and kind of get into the weeds with a couple of pieces here in TWL, sticking with inventory control topics. Today we're going to hit up short picks inventory discrepancies. Just real quick, I work for a company called Flowworks International out of Houston, Texas. We've got branches in Saudi Arabia, China, and we do some sales into Europe, as well as being a pretty good presence in our market in the Southeast. All right, commercial over with. Let's get down to it. So we're talking about short picks today. And I want to show you guys what are some of the controlling parameters and then what it really looks like down on the RF devices for your warehouse folks. Your primary pick parameter when it comes to short picking is parameter 1050. You know, when the picker picks short, how does the system respond? Then we're also going to talk about parameter 7001. It talks about what happens when a short pick occurs on a ship complete order. All right, so parameter 1050 here. You've got three options, and you can kind of see them there. A lot of this dialogue is taken right from the TWL parameter. But you're given three options. You pick short, namely you fill what the picker says you can fill, and then you close the rest of that line. You leave the pick open, and so no partial quantities are allowed. And then the third one is prompting the picker. What this kind of looks like, guys, is here. Okay, so first, all those of you who operate the RF devices, this is a screen you know and love. I'm going to pull up this order and go ahead and pull up one of our lines. No China, no Taiwan. Don't send this there. Go ahead and get entry into my location. Enter the item. Hang on a second. Let me do that right. Picker goes to this location. Notice how it's being prompted, or he's being prompted to pick 6. We don't got a 6 there. I put in a 5. You get the "Are you sure?" TWL wants to hear the same thing twice. I'm going to say, yeah, just 5. I'll go ahead and enter in or scan my carton label. It's going to prompt me, short, pick 1 more. I'm going to say, no, there's no more here. And then it's pushing me to the next line. I go ahead and take a look at this, and this is my item. I go down into it. I've got my item here. Notice how my actual quantity is coming up as 5. But this line itself is already flowing right to packed. Okay, so it took that I closed it short. It's taking that to be the situation, and it's already packed this line for us. So that's option number 1. For option number 2, I get something more like this. I'm going into another one of my warehouses that I've set this parameter for. Go into the item. All right, wants me to pick 11. I go there. I don't have 11 here. Got 10. Once again, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, notice how it's scanning me to go ahead and prompting me to go ahead and scan my carton label. Same location, I'm going to say no. Okay, and here it's pushing me to another location. Okay, it's automatically creating that pick for me. When we take a look at it here in the online, I'm going to go ahead and see that my actual quantity is less than, and notice that line is still in pick. Okay, it's not going to finish it off. It won't let me close it. So those are options number 1 and options number 2. Let's go ahead and take a look at our third option of prompting the picker. Okay, in this warehouse, I have it set to option number 3. Same deal. All right, once we pick a quantity of 4, I'm going to say 3. Goes ahead, and hang on a second there. Let me do that again. All right, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Enter scan my carton ID. Pick more. No, I don't have any more to pick here. Notice how now I'm being prompted different than the other 2. It's asking me, do you want to close the pick? Yes or no? I'm going to go ahead and say yes here. And my results, if I go back to the online, are going to be very similar to what I saw before. Okay, notice how I've got my 3 right here? But when I scroll off to the right, already I'm capped, okay? So it's where you, so why would you do these? Why would you choose between these 3 options? It's a matter of what kind of control you need to give your pickers. Okay, if your pickers are part-timers, your pickers are not highly qualified in the product, guys, you probably want to choose option number 2. And you want to choose option number 2 because it's going to leave those picks open so that when it comes back to the order manager for review, your order manager can make the decision of, okay, we're going to go ahead and unpick. We're going to modify that order so that it goes out clean. Option number 1, on the other hand, is how much responsibility do you place with your pickers? And then, of course, the ultimate responsibility comes to prompt the picker, number 3. You know, how much do you trust your pickers to decide, for this order, now I can't short pick. We've got to figure it out. We've got to modify the order. We can't have any back orders going to this client. Or that picker has that responsibility, has that knowledge of the business to know that, yeah, we can close this one out. It'll be fine if that customer gets a back order. One of the places then that this really comes into effect is, what if this is a ship complete issue? If it's a ship complete, once again, how do you want to do this? Do you want to hold it, and it's a hard hold, and that order cannot go out of your warehouse until you lift that hold, or do you want it to leave it open? Then the picker comes back to the supervisor and says, we're short, this is ship complete, how do you want to handle it? That looks a little something like this. Whenever I do these kind of demos in the company, I always say, this is the benefit, guys, of being able to scan. And pick more now. Notice my prompt now that I'm getting. This is ship complete. What do we want to do? Do we want to hold the line? Do we want to leave it open? And specifically, this is an example that we get with prompting the picker. And that's what you get, guys, with options 4, 5, and 6. Notice where we have that set here in the company is number 6. So we had some short picks here. Every time you create a short pick, you're going to get a situation where it creates that inventory discrepancy. Inventory discrepancy, guys, these are found from your modules menu up under inventory control and then inventory discrepancies. And here you can see popped open our inventory discrepancy window. Please rest assured, this is from our big warehouse and this is from our dev system. So we've got quite a few inventory discrepancies that haven't been worked. When I go in and I pop open, okay, some modules, inventory control, inventory discrepancies. Now I could see some of these inventory discrepancies that we had just worked. When we have discrepancies created by these short picks, you're always going to get these quantity discrepancies, okay? With these quantity discrepancies, your real way to clear these guys is to go out and do a stock adjustment at that location. One of your options, though, is to create cycle counts. So I've got this whole list on the inventory manager. I need to get these cleaned up because these quantity discrepancies are telling me that there's some difference between what my workforce found on the floor versus what we think TWL is doing. Or it could just be a case that operator JF01 here, he's a new guy. He doesn't really know what he's doing. By highlighting all of JF01's discrepancies, I can create cycle counts. What this is asking for, guys, is do you want to create all the locations? Here in the company, we have an awful lot of product that's stored in multiple locations. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. My other option could be just the locations where the discrepancy occurred. My assumption could be that I'm in, let's say you're in a situation like what Andy described, where you're picking from open cases and you've got your full cases in another location. I'm going to want to choose this one instead, because my full cases, my full pallets that haven't been touched, they're probably just fine. It's those open boxes I'm going to focus on. I'm going to do all the locations, and then I'm going to delete the discrepancies after the count is created. Your other option there is you don't delete the discrepancies. When you create the count, you delete the discrepancies when you actually do the count, and you make that adjustment that brings your inventory back in line. I'm going to go ahead and press Create Counts. Once I do that, TWL is going to give me my count report. And it's going to kind of go through and tell me all the locations it created a cycle count for. Guys, this then can get integrated directly into your cycle count process. So if you're counting A's and B's, kind of like what Andy was talking about earlier, this will be another cycle count that'll pop up on those RF devices for your cycle counters. And of course, your other controls are in place where you can go ahead and assign those counts to specific individuals if you need to. So kind of a quick dive in to TWL operations when it comes to short counts, to short picks, and discrepancies that they create. That kind of concludes my piece of it. Andy, back to you.
Yeah, that was great, George. One thing I wanted to add that that was in that inventory discrepancies module. Could you bring that back open? While George is doing that, there's not an official housekeeping list. There's been one that's been passed around, and I share with folks as well. There's half a dozen or so things that I think are housekeeping things that need to be done each day in TWL, and a couple of them are related to inventory, and one of them specifically is on this topic we're talking about right here. And along with you doing what George is talking about, reviewing any short picks that were done, because those are situations where you might be missing inventory, there's also a checkbox on this page that says negative and zero inventory, just to the left of where George is right now. That is on the housekeeping list as well. And you can do the same thing as George just did setting the cycle count for this. You can identify these inventory records that are either at zero quantity or negative quantity and throw them on the list. And those specifically might be great examples for doing all locations. So if we have a -1 somewhere, we probably are over in another bin, right? We had 5 and 5 in 2 bins, but in real life we had 6 and 4. So when someone picked 5 out of the bin, they created a -1. Or when someone picked 6 out of the bin with 5, they created a -1. And then we're sure to be over in the other bin. So if we count all locations for that item, we're going to find out, well, yeah, I have a -1 here because I have 1 extra over there. Okay? But that was great. That's just a little thing I wanted to tack on about the inventory discrepancies. So yeah, we said we'd do about 45 minutes, and we're almost at 40 minutes here. So time for Q&A. If anyone has questions, please do enter them in the question panel, or you can raise your hand. If it's a little bit more lengthy, then you can type, and we'll take you off mute, and you can ask your question out loud. There are no questions, which makes me sad because I love answering questions.
I see two hands raised, though, Andy.
You do? Where? What? Oh, there's hand. I don't even know how to work the control panel. Look at me. I'm a rookie.
No, it's okay. Frank Richards has his hand raised. So, Frank, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and go ahead and talk.
Hi.
You're live, Frank.
My question is, how would you set up a cycle count for your A items? Would you do that here?
Yeah, that's a great question. George, you've got TWL open, so please do the driving. There's, in TWL specifically, there's automated and there's manual. So you can always manually create a count, and you could do it by rank. Perfect. Well, there are no A items.
Yeah, I think this is data. I can give you.
They're all D.
I got a lot of D's in this
Yeah.
warehouse. This is all data, and this is one of my new warehouses. So
Yeah.
we haven't implemented ABC, but this is going ahead and making use of that type. And again, you go into cycle counts, and that's just right up there at the top right-hand corner. Let me see if I've got, I believe I can give you a little something better over here. This is a slightly older warehouse. If I can drive properly.
Yay.
So there you go. So here we're in 9091 J&J bar. I've already done my ABC association, and I can show you, so here I can just create for a group of A's. I've got the ability to cycle through, do more. Notice how it's capturing my last count dates. I can go and I can show my B's and do it in that manner. This does not override if you have the ABC counts set up. This won't override that, but it can be done if you need to pull in an extra items, A items. You've got vacation time planned. You're coming into the Christmas holidays. You're maybe you have a company that has forced leave time, holiday time during the Christmas season. This is something you could do to catch up, find those items that haven't had a last count in a while.
Right on. Good deal. Frank, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But just a follow-up. In SX, we have set up cycle counts, if you want to call it that print every Friday, for example. How do we do it in in TWL to cycle through our A items on a weekly or daily basis? Is that even possible?
I think George is going to take us there.
Yeah. So one of the things that starts is it starts right here with setting up your ABC rotation, where you go ahead and you set up how often you want to count, through your items. Your second place that you're going to look at is coming out here to your ABC classification, and this is where you set how often you want to reset that classification. How often do you want to redo that? How often do you want to shuffle between A, B's, and C's? Your last setup that you want to be looking at is out here your end of day. So end of day is where you actually set creating your cycle counts. Obviously, you can see for Warehouse 9090, with about 2-month-old data here, we've got it to where we're not setting up automated cycle counts. And then that end of day, this runs off the end of day scripts. So if you only want to do that once a week, that's where your end of day script that actually gets set up by your Unix or Linux engineer needs to be able to needs to be set up to fire off only once a week. Majority of TWL users that I've run into that are making use of this, they're generally running it as an end of day. They're generally running it every evening, and every day they're creating cycle counts that are out there. And that's the case of how big that is.
There's a parameter for counting and days of the week that you count. So if you did truly want to count just 1 day a week, the default is 5 days a week. You probably expect it to be in inventory control, but it's probably not in there. Or it's system. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that catch, Andy. Exactly. Here's a good tool to use as well. And this is like you can see, parameter 1085.
Right on. Yeah, so one other thing to note as well, Frank, for you and for everyone else, your rank in SX is not your rank in TWL. Those are two different things. And even though your consultant or Infor may have pre-populated TWL with your SX ranks, the screen that George was showing you there before is TWL taking over the ranking. That's done from within TWL, and it's strictly based on the velocity of the product within TWL. So it's possible an item could be a B item in SX and be an A item in TWL. That's totally a possibility.
Yeah, and at FlowWorks we have the policy that we want our ABC ranks at TWL to always match SX.enterprise. So that's something we control through progress programming.
Very good. Okay, we have another question too from Marvin. Gary, since you're available, will you work your magic? Maybe he's back on the phone.
Guys, can you hear me okay?
There's Marvin. Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. We have an automated out-of-balance report that runs every morning. And I'm assuming that the information in terms of the quantity discrepancy report captures that same information in terms of the inventory being out of balance. Is that true? Is that an accurate statement?
It can, but it's not. That's not always the case, because what your out of balance is telling you is, what SX.enterprise has as your ICSW balances versus what your total quantities are in TWL. It will usually point to, if you're out of balance between SX and TWL, you will usually find a discrepancy somewhere in TWL where, somebody, you had a bad receiving, you had a bad count sometime, you had a bad put away, but they are not perfectly balanced all the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally follow, Marvin.
Okay. Well, what I'm getting at is that, looking at quantity in terms of the discrepancy at each day, I'm thinking that we should probably add that into our end-of-day process. And I'm thinking if we are, I don't think it's considered. But I guess I'm getting at, just running the quality discrepancy report could be something that we would run on a daily basis.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I totally follow.
I usually recommend not doing your out of balance as a daily task, because if you have an order that gets hung up going through invoice processing, it pops up in your OEIX, your invoice exceptions. You're going to be out of balance for the items that are on that sales order, because you've completed picking down in TWL, but it hasn't relieved that inventory in SX.enterprise. And that's the situation that we do have in the company. So we usually try to do that as a weekly task among our inventory managers, where they're running that over the weekend. They've got that sitting in their inbox Monday morning, and then they know that inventory discrepancies, or excuse me, out of balances that are popping up there probably really are a problem, as opposed to some delay to the update in SX.enterprise. Another way to keep your balance report low, small, is of course to keep an eye on Willet, the WLIT screen, and make sure that you're clearing those errors as they pop up.
Yeah, that's all good. Marvin, I think I just want to explain your question and show an example for those that may have not gotten it, like I did not get it. Let me, I'll change myself to the presenter here real quick. And so an inventory discrepancy doesn't necessarily mean there's an out of balance, right? We can have 10 in SX and we can have 10 in TWL. An inventory discrepancy occurred today when we had a pick for 5, right? And then they went out there and we were supposed to pick 5, and it turns out there's not 10 in the bin. There's not even 5 in the bin. There's only 4. So they pick 4. That creates an inventory discrepancy from the short pick. But just that function in and of itself didn't really do anything to the inventory balances. So in SX, we still have 10 minus our 4 that were actually shipped. So we have 6. And in TWL, we have 10 minus our 4 that were actually shipped. We still have 6. So you end up with an imbalance situation, but you definitely have an inventory discrepancy. So one thing here that I'll mention is in the inventory discrepancies, the way that I explain this screen here is anytime someone does something that does something different than what they were told to by TWL, an inventory discrepancy is created, and we may have very logical reasons to do that. For example, this is a put away that suggested us to put it in bin new parts. Well, that's a bin we created for a specific situation. It's a new product, and we put it in a bin that we would like to, and it's bin G. So that's going to happen every time we get in a new part, right? A bunch of these things are going to occur, and I don't want to cycle count that. I don't care about that at all. Maybe I do care about short picks. So you can use the filters in here and say just picks. That's an IG transaction, and maybe a pick from a different location doesn't concern you, right? They were supposed to pick from this dock, and they picked from this bin. You're only concerned with a quantity change on a pick. Okay, we're supposed to pick 4 and they pick 10. We're supposed to pick 10 and they pick 0. Okay, those are bad things. I want someone to count those. Then you could create cycle counts for all of these from here. If you do want to go nutso, and I've seen folks do this before, if you do want to count all of them, there's a better way than using this screen at all, and George touched on it. It's in the end of day setup. We don't do just cycle counts, we also do discrepancy counts. So if you turn this on, every inventory discrepancy is going to be on a cycle count automatically. But that means all the putaways, all the different bins, all that stuff is going to be on there, not just the short picks or not just the quantity changes. Okay, so just wanted to add that on. And then there's one other question here that came from Bob. He wants to count bins, not products. Right, so is there any way to do that? And the short answer is yes, and here's how you do it. I got to get this question panel out of the way here.
Andy, you want me to go ahead and display it on my resolution?
Oh, sure. Is this like mega tiny? I'm sorry. Let me switch back to you. Give it back to George. Sorry, I have like a tiny laptop with super high resolution. There you go.
So you can always go ahead and you're up the left-hand corner of the screen. You can, I have it set to item right now, but you can set that to location. And so from there you can go ahead and you can see we've laid out this warehouse with location sequences. And so I can go ahead and really just go ahead and clear an entire row if I wanted to. You can also go ahead, you can see how we have our sequencing. I can show everything 115 display, and now I'm getting into my 115s. So you could tell that we've got some that are full, some that are empty. I can count everything, in which case it will send me to a bin with a 0 pick, that it thinks is empty. Or I could just go ahead and choose, by holding down my control key, those items that are not empty. So you can definitely do that. Something like this would be, I know that I moved new product in there. Let's say I consolidated a warehouse, and I know I'm worried about what might have happened here down this aisle.
Right. I think the best reason to use this is for the ones that aren't highlighted right now, actually those empties. So I think this concept for TWL specifically is one that isn't explained very well, and that is the automated counts that are by item. You say how many items you want to count or how frequently you want to count your ABC items. We're only telling you to go count somewhere where we know product exists, where there's an inventory record. So all these bins, like the first 8 bins or whatever that George has up on there that say they're empty, you would never count those. TWL would never tell you to count them because it doesn't think anything is in there. But what if there is something in there, right? So really, this is kind of a big miss on the TWL application. If you don't cover the building, you never really find product that is misplaced. You'd have to kind of stumble across it. So in the cycle counting regimen, it's not in there to have you check for stuff that might be misplaced. And that's exactly the way to do it. Bob's got it. If you want to count the building wall to wall, you select it by bin location, and then you can do your ABC or your max items a day to target specific products and kind of ramp up those counts. Count them more than, like I was saying, you want to count them more than once a year. Do that in the cycle count setup. Let's see if there's any other questions here. And I think we need to wrap up because I would never do a 1-hour presentation.
I don't want to work that hard.
Hold on, we've got one more question. Regarding an IG discrepancy record where an item is picked short order to 0, if the picker then goes back in and processes the pick properly, is there a setting which would remove the previous discrepancy? I can't say that I've ever tested that to be sure, but I would gather the answer is no. No.
Yeah, that's your only 2 options there are you delete the discrepancy when you create the count, like we saw on the discrepancy screen, or you do a cycle count. You hit that inventory record with with an adjustment, and that would clear that up afterwards.
Right, and I suppose by that same logic, any other discrepancy that was created, if you did a bunch of short picks on an order, you could unpick the order and then repick the order and pick it and ship it 100% correct, but you've already created those discrepancies. They're out there, and they're not going to go away from any other method. Okay, one more question. George, you got something else for that one before we move on?
Just one thing I'd like to say. When you look at discrepancy screens, guys, I popped up the location problems, and Andy touched upon this earlier. My rule of thumb when I'm talking to our inventory managers, I'm talking to our warehouse managers, quantity discrepancies might be a problem with your pickers, might be a problem with your put-away guys. It might be a problem with your workforce. A location discrepancy, like we see right here, though, 9 out of 10 times, that comes back as a problem that you, the inventory manager, you, the warehouse designer, need to address. Because that usually is an indication that your people are being prompted to put something away in a location or pick from a location, and they're saying, nah, I'm going to go to this location instead. And it's a sign that your controls, your pick sequencing may not be as set up as efficiently as you wanted it to be.
That is an excellent point, put very well. Absolutely, yeah. If they're constantly overriding something, then we're probably not telling them the right thing to do, right? Troy, did you have a question still? I was going to take you off of mute. Raise your hand again if you want to throw your question out. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up and we'll sneak in at 59 minutes, finishing just under an hour. Okay, no more Troy. So I think we're done. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We really appreciate going through. That's the fun part of doing this, not talking to a blank screen. So Gary, you got wrap-up words?
My wrap-up is thank you guys for a great presentation, and for everybody else, have a great weekend. We'll see you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
George.